Hey Kids Club, I miss you all. I hope you are all doing well at home, and we're just all praying for you. We miss you all. Today, I wanted to show you guys a few things that I had at my house that I wanted to see. I have this. It's a camera. It's a really cool camera. I got it from my grandpa. And I have this. Whoops, things are attached. I have this. This is for my boys. It's cool, right? It's a little flashlight, but it looks like a light bulb. These are my husband's glasses. I don't wear glasses, but I think they're really cool. And I have a magnifying glass. And so when you see all those items together, what do they have in common? A flashlight, a camera with a zoom lens, magnifying glasses. What do they all help with? Yeah, they help you to see. They help you to see something. In the dark, sometimes you need a light, right? A camera, you can really zoom in and this helps you to focus. You could zoom in far away. Magnifying glass can help you to see small little things. And glasses, sometimes our vision is blurry or sometimes we need help to see things. You see, I brought all those things because all of those things help us to see. And today I wanted to tell you a story about some people that I think they needed help to see who God was, help to be able to trust God. And so I want to tell you this story. So we are going to have a story today in the desert. This is a little piece of desert in my yard. Now, after God created the world, there was also that great flood. You can read all about that in the book of Genesis in the Bible. But after the flood, the people began to fill up the earth with life again. They began to go in all four corners of the earth. And the animals and the people did. And they began to go and live along rivers and streams because that's where they would have food and water to survive. People need food and water to survive. And so the people began to go and live in all of these places. And eventually they came together and crowded in different places. And eventually they lived in cities. And one of the greatest cities was the city of Ur. But in Ur, the people there did not believe in just one God. They believed in many gods. They believed that there was a God of every flower, a God of the plants, of the rocks, of the trees, of the oceans, the rains. But there was one family who believed that there was just one God of everything. Of everything. And people, a part of this great family, there were Abram and Sarai. Now, they believed there was just one God everywhere, but they weren't exactly sure, and weren't really sure how. Now, one day, Abram and Sarai, they had to move to a new place. And so they began to travel with family, lots of animals, travel through the desert to go to this new place. It was a long, long travel. I'm sure they had to stop at night and rest. It was probably very cold in the desert. And during the day, it was probably really hot. They were probably tired. But eventually, they came all the way, whoops, sometimes they fall down too. They came all the way to a place called Haran. All the way here. And in Haran, Abram, as he often did, went out into the desert and he prayed to God. And what is so cool is when he prayed, God came close to him and he was close to God. And Abram knew what God wanted him to do, that he was to keep going. And so Abram and his wife, they left. But this time, they did not have the rivers to guide them. And they just traveled, unsure, would God be in all of these places? Now, they finally came to a place called Shechem. And in Shechem, Abram realized God was in this place. And so Abram built an altar to show God was here. He wasn't just here. God was here too. But then they had to continue traveling. And eventually they came to a new place called Bethel. And again, in Bethel, Abram went out and prayed. And God was here too. God as he was realizing, was everywhere. He was here, he was here, he was everywhere. Pretty cool. So then Abram and his wife, they continued on. They finally came to a place called Hebron. All these weird words, huh? They sound very different to us sometimes. And when Abram was here, he went out into the desert. And again, he talked with God, came close to him, and God came close to him. And when he was here, God told him that he was going to have a great family, a huge family that was so big, it was like all the stars in the sky and all the grains of sand on the earth. Now you can imagine Abram laughed at that, thinking, do you see how old we are? Look at us. We're too old to have children. How on earth is this possible? But Abram, he had to learn that nothing is impossible with God. Now, God made this promise to them and told them to change their names to Abraham and Sarah. And so that's what they did, even though they didn't quite really trust that God could do this great thing. They had to wait many, many years. I wonder if you've ever had to wait. Waiting is so hard. Maybe you've waited for God to stop COVID, to stop coronavirus, so you can go back to school or be with your families. Maybe you've been waiting for God to answer your prayers. You've been asking and pleading with God, and you haven't gotten the answer you wanted yet. Waiting can be hard, especially when we don't see what God is doing. Now, Abram and Sarah, they waited a long time, years and years and years. And one day, some visitors came to visit them, and they told Abram that he was going to give birth to a son. And when this happened and Sarah overheard this, she just laughed. Like, that's so impossible. Do you not see how old we are? Look at our bodies. There's no way we could have a child. This is impossible. It's kind of funny to think. They just laughed. Now, sadly, they tried to make this promise happen on their own. They didn't have eyes to see, and it was hard to wait. We all have hard times waiting. But guess what? Eventually, God did give them a child. They gave birth to a son, just as God said they would, and they named him Isaac. And eventually, Isaac got married to a woman named Rebecca, who wanted to be a part of this great family that they told about. There are so many other details about this story, but what is beautiful about this story is that this family continued and continued and continued because they had children, and their children had children, and their children had children, and their children had children, until the great family was huge, until you were born, until you became a part of the great family. That is so great as the number of stars in the sky and the grains of sand on the earth. Abraham and Sarah had to wait a long time, years and years and years, for something that God had promised them. And they had to wait, and waiting was really, really hard. And I'm sure there were many days, many years, long time, where they just felt like, God, we don't see what you're doing. What are you doing? You promised something. And where are you? And I know right now, a lot of us may feel like, God, what are you doing? Why haven't you answered this prayer? Or why aren't you fixing the world the way that we think it should be fixed? For some of us, it's hard to see, right? It's hard to see. We are looking for something, and it's hard for us to see God. But I hope that you can see in this story that God was at work. He doesn't always promise to make things happen right away, the way we want, exactly as we think. But we can trust God, that God is still at work, that He is still good, and He's still powerful, and He can do something amazing, like give a child to somebody whose body shouldn't normally have a child, right? Who we would think, that's impossible. So today, what do you think is impossible? Where do you need help to see God? Maybe today you can ask God to help you to trust Him, to be able to see how He's at work. And that maybe you'll be able to see how God loves you so much. And even if He's not answering your prayers exactly as you want, He loves you and He's still present and He's still at work. If only we could see. And so,